Hello everyone, today's topic is about consecutive translation. The main task of interpreter which performs a consecutive translation is to memorize a fragment of the text and its meaning and to reproduce it in another language, preserving not only the sense but also the style, emotional representation that the speaker used. For skilled text reproduction in the target language, the translator must have a developed memory, good sense of style, and possess some acting data. Oral consecutive interpretation is very popular in the modern business world. This is connected with the constant development of international relations. The activity of an interpreter is to translate 2 or 3 phrases of a speaker by ear when a pause occurs in his speech. One-sided and two-sided consecutive interpretation. In unilateral consecutive interpreting, only one language direction is interpreted. This type of interpreting is generally required if one or more contributors are invited who doesn't speak the language of the audience. For example, at press conferences, receptions, short workshops, interviews, and if technical expense of setting up simultaneous interpreting equipment is too great. Unilateral consecutive interpreting, the interpreter works from a foreign language, the language of the speaker, into their native language, that of the listeners, in which they make notes and reproduce these concisely at short intervals. Bilateral interpretation is a type of interpretation that includes an interpreter between two parties. This interpreter works as a mediator between two parties, translating each group's speech for the other group. Bilingual interpreters will be asked to regularly switch from one language to the next as they mediate between the two parties. Bilateral interpretation services are most notably used in meetings, negotiations, and other conferences that include multiple parties. Of those uses, bilateral interpreting is most beneficial for meetings between multiple parties using different languages. This type of interpretation allows meetings to move smoothly with clear communication. It's also a strong interpreting method for smaller groups of people rather than a larger group. As a rule, translator in the course of his work is in close proximity to the speaker, which allows him to see facial expressions, gestures, and hear the intonation of the speaker. This helps the interpreter to more accurately convey the meaning of what has been said. There are times when the interpreter is in another room and hears the text through the headphones, then it's very important that the translator can see the speaker. Otherwise, there may be errors in the translated material which may be irreversible for the other listeners. Often in linguistic circles, this kind of translation is called a paragraph phrase. One of mandatory requirements for interpretation is speed. Tentatively, this speed should be in the upper limit of speed of the perception of oral speech. If the speaker makes his speech quickly, the translator must quickly reproduce the translation. And if the speaker delivers the speech slowly, the interpreter must represent the translation faster than the speaker. The presence of pauses in the speech of the speaker and interpreter should be reduced to the very minimum. The most incredible oral consecutive interpreting is waiting for the performer who works at the conferences and translates the discussion. Regardless of whether official negotiations are conducted or not, the interpreter does not have information about the speeches of the speakers, the issues that were raised during the discussion.